In your early years learning math, one of the most important relationships to understand is the relationship between fractions and decimals. I want you to always, when you see fractions and decimals, just think of this. There are two different ways to express the same number. And so in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to convert a fraction to a terminating decimal. So how am I going to do this? I always like to start by introducing the terms that we're talking about. We're going to review a terminating decimal, and always remember that a fraction is a part of a quantity. And I'm going to show you the steps that I like to follow and that I recommend that you follow when you're converting a fraction to a terminating decimal. And then we're going to use those same steps to walk through some examples together. So let's get started. A terminating decimal is simply a decimal that has digits that end. And we can also say, for those who are higher students in higher grades, they have a finite number of digits, which means they have a specific number of digits. And so another example, let's look at some examples here actually. Terminating decimals, we can say something like 3.2. That's a terminating decimal. You can see that it has a specific number of digits after the decimal point. We also have 0.85, specific number of digits, and 14.384. So specific number of digits. Now, how can we convert a fraction to a decimal? We will first start by remembering that when we have a fraction, if I write something like this, 3/8, this 3 here is my dividend, and I'll tell you what that means shortly. And 8 is your divisor, so that means you're going to write it in this form. We're going to use the long division method. So your dividend, and this is your divisor. And then if there's a non-zero remainder left, we'll put a decimal point in the quotient and a 0 to the right of the dividend. And we'll continue with the long division, adding 0 to the remainder until we have a remainder of 0. The reason why we have to have a remainder of 0 is because we said this is a terminating decimal, which means it must end. Now let's apply this to some examples. We want to convert 2/5 to a decimal. The first thing we're going to do is we have 2 is our dividend and 5 is our divisor. So what we're going to do now is we're going to find out how many groups of 5 are in 2. We know that 2 is less than 5, so there's going to be no group of 5 in 2. So now you have two methods. There are two methods that are taught. One method is to go ahead and follow the long division method. And so I'll show you the two just for this example, and then you can use whichever one you prefer because we have some other examples to walk through. So we have 0 multiplied by 5 is going to be 0. So we subtract, and then 2 minus 0, we have 2. And because 2 is still less than 5, we can put a decimal right here. And then we multiply, and this decimal gives us the authority to make this 20. 20 divided by 5, we have 4. 4 multiplied by 5, we have 20. And then we can subtract, and we have 0. Now the other method, which I like to use actually, is we have 2 here and then 5. And 2 is less than 5, so I'm just going to put a 0 and I'm going to put a decimal here and then just add a 20. Make this 20 by adding a 0 to the right of 2. 20 divided by 5, we have 4. 4 multiplied by 5, we have 20. So we have 20 right here. And then we subtract, and we're left with a remainder of 0. So therefore, 2/5 is going to be 0.4. So this simply means that the 2/5, another way to represent that number, that quantity, is 0.4. Another example, convert 3 over 4 to a decimal. So we're going to, we have 3, we have 4. 3 is less than 4, so I'm just going to put a 0 here and I'm going to put a decimal. And then that allows me to make this 30. 30 divided by 4, we have 7 groups of 4 in 30. 7 multiplied by 4, we have 28. And then we subtract, we have 2. Because we have this decimal here, we can make this 20. 20 divided by 4, we have 5. 5 multiplied by 4, we have 20. And then we have a remainder of 0. So therefore, 3 over 4 is also expressed as 0.75. And then, next example, we have an improper fraction. 43 divided by 40. So don't forget, 43 is going to be our dividend. 40 is going to be our divisor. So how many groups of 40 do we have in 43? That's going to be 1. 1 multiplied by 40, we have 40. Let's subtract, and we have a remainder of 3. 3 divided by 40 is, it's going to be 0. So in this case, we're just going to put a decimal right here because you can't put a 0. You already have a 1 here, so it allows you to just go ahead and introduce your decimal. Now we're going to have 30. 30 divided by 40. How many groups of 40 in 30? We have none, so we're going to write a 0 here. 0 multiplied by 40, we have 0. We subtract, and now we have 30. And then, because we have this decimal already, we can introduce another 0 here. So 300 divided by 40, you're going to have 7 groups of 40 in 300. 7 multiplied by 40, we have 280. And then we can subtract. So we have 0, this is going to give us 20. And then we can now introduce another 0. 200 divided by 40, we have 5. 5 multiplied by 40, we have 200. And we can subtract, and we get to our 0. So therefore, 43 over 40 is the same as 1.075. Now our final example, we have 13 over 8 to a decimal. We have 13 as our dividend, 8 as our divisor. So we're going to now divide. How many groups of 8 in 13? 1 group. The reason why is because 8 multiplied by 1 is 8. 8 multiplied by 2 is 16. 13 is less than 16, so we're going to use 1 as the multiple. 1 multiplied by 8, we have 8. Now we can subtract, and we have 5. So 5 is less than 8, so let's go ahead and put a decimal here. That allows us to make this 50. 50 divided by 8, we have 6 groups of 8 in 50. 6 multiplied by 8 is 48. And we subtract, and we're left with 2. Now that we have 2, because of the decimal, we can introduce a 0 here. 20 divided by 8, we have 2 groups of 8 in 20. So 2 multiplied by 8, we have 16. And then we can subtract, and we're left with a remainder of 4. Now 4 divided by 8, the decimal allows us to make this 40. 40 divided by 8, we have 5. 5 multiplied by 8, we have 40. So that we can subtract, and then we have a 0. So 13 divided by 8 is equal to 1.625.